Online. Good afternoon from TU Delft and welcome to the Higher Education Day, part of the Disruptive Innovation Festival 2016. I'm Mike Tennant from Imperial College London. Today's linear take, make, dispose economic model relies on large quantities of cheap, easily accessible materials and energy. It's a model that's reaching its physical limits, so we need to do something differently. According to some, the circular economy is an attractive and viable alternative that may act to disrupt and reshape the global economy. If this is the case, then what skills and knowledge do we need to make it happen? In the studio with me today to discuss this are Ruud Balkenende, Professor of Circular Product Design here at TU Delft, Alexandre Lemil from the Circular Economy Africa Network, and Nitesh Magdani, Group Director of Sustainability at BAM Construct. As usual, don't forget to tweet questions at us on the hashtag ThinkDiff. So, doing things differently. So Ruud, I'd like to ask you to kick off here. In your opinion, from your background, what do you think the skills and knowledge required to transition to a circular economy actually are?
Yeah, quite broad question, I would say, and I will get back to my background before I started working here in Delft. I've been working at Philips Electronics for quite some time, over 20 years, and in a company, it's basically about making a product. A product already is made in such a way that you apply quite a number of different disciplines to create it. In circular economy, you have to drive that to a higher level. It's not just about different disciplines that need to interact and business focus that, of course, needs to match. It's also about how the environment is affected. And it is also, because the environment, of course, also is something that already, to some extent at least, has been taken into account for quite some time. It's also about, when you look at products, how can you reuse them? How can you remanufacture them? So how can you keep value instead of just remaining at materials level? To achieve that, I think that you still need the disciplinary knowledge. You still need, as companies usually already do, have a user focus, but in addition, you need to have a focus on the entire system. You need to have a focus on the environment, but also on the societal aspects and on the way in which government can interact with this.
Okay, well, thank you. And I know that we're going to follow up on the idea of systems later on with the video, so we'll certainly be picking up on that point. So Nitesh, Ruud works on product design, you work on the built environment. So what's your take on skills for circular economy?
Thanks, Mike. I think generally in the built environment, there's a lack of acknowledgement that we are dealing with complex systems, complex components, products, products that have been manufactured, and our supply chains are very long. And also, the built environment is here for decades, if not centuries. And the range of people that we need to sort of give their skills to when we're thinking about the circular economy ranges from developers, clients, planners, architects, engineers, contractors, but also our FM teams who operate buildings for us. And the contractual arrangements vary enormously, as do the warranty periods that we get from manufacturers, products, suppliers, and ownership models tend to vary as well. So it's a very complex structure, and therefore the skills of that are required to service a circular economy need to think about the business models, how transactions are made, what information is passed on, how do we gather that information, what role does technology play, but also the transparency that we have with our supply chain. And again, it relates to the information management as well. So the skills are really varied, but certainly the built environment is seen to be very slow to change. So trying to get the thinking and the influence from maybe the younger generation would help to sort of bring those skills through. because there's a wider acknowledgement that things should be done differently, I suppose.
Okay. So just picking up on that particular point before we move over to you, Alex. What skills do you think that the younger generation have that we need to do this? And I'm sure that there are people out there in DIF land who are thinking, what can we bring? What concrete skills can we actually do we need to develop to be circular economy experts?
Sure. I mean, generally, again, going back to the built environment, we are slow to change. The industry, because it's so complex, takes a while to acknowledge, the different skills that are required. But generally, we need to start thinking outside of the box, thinking, not just let's do what we did last time, but create a journey where we can have multiple edges, so scaling edges. And we're starting to do that within large businesses like ours, where we have smaller teams that are sort of taking the lead, are going out talking to universities, and bringing in different skill sets. So looking at information, the role of building information modeling. Where do we get data from? What use is that data? How can we empower the younger generation to sort of bring that skill set through, to make the changes that we need for to change a very traditional mindset.
Okay, thank you, Alex. What are your what are your thoughts on this? The skills that people need, and maybe you want to contextualize this by telling the audience what you do.
I was just saying that beyond the skills that we need in the product design space, as well as in the wider business systemic thinking, like our friend here, Nitesh, in the build environment, I focus more my work on the social impact of a circular economy. Because if we want to build the next economic model, we need to care about the potential social risk. And the World Economic Forum issued some global reports on risk, and the social risk are as important as the environmental risk. So in terms of skills, one of the critical skills that I see in this next economic model is building trust and developing our skills around trusting each other, because in this end of oil era, we hear a lot of lies, okay? Because we need to hide stuff, because obviously the fossil fuel and the carbon era has a huge impact not only on the environment but also on the social aspect. So developing trust to create partnerships in a collaborative economy is something not easy to create and to enable, but this is critical to develop. So this is the first skill. The second skill is an outcome-based business and skill sets where we will be measured on achievement. So that's a bit of your performance economy that we discussed this morning. So instead of being recognized as the number of buildings we create, we need to be recognized as the results, focused on results. Then obviously adaptability and versatility. Others have talked about it, and we will talk about it in the videos. And the last one is the empathy, developing empathy skills, because we learn about things or from something or from someone, but we don't experience the learning on the field, and we believe we know better. And in a circular economy, you need to restore the economy by intention and design, and to develop that better design, we need to gain more experience and empathy. So these are the few skills that I had in mind.
Okay, thank you. So very interesting set of skills that you can't necessarily learn at a university, but maybe are pertinent. I saw both of our other participants nodding away there. So what does this mean to you, Ruud? So product design. Do you think about the social and the soft skills when you do this?
I completely agree that you should take those into account, and that trust is quite essential thing when it comes to cooperation, like you need in a circular economy. It's also a thing that might be difficult to really force, because as you said, it's not a thing that you learn at school or at university. Of course, behavior of people is to some extent culturally determined. But trust is an essential thing. When it comes to skills that you use in product design, cooperation is a critical one, I would say. You always cooperate within a company, over a value chain. I think that's something that we can improve on is the social aspect. So at the moment our focus is quite strongly on the environmental aspects, and the social aspects are something that should be further developed. The type of metrics that you are developing might be quite useful there, for instance.
Okay. And Nitesh, I mean, the built environment, it's socially embedded, isn't it? So how do you move from bricks and mortar to bricks and mortar and people?
There are various different types of economies. You know, we talk about the sharing economy, and I think that really applies to many different industries, but also in terms of Airbnb and how we utilize space. They've obviously started that mechanism, but we often think about how we can help our clients to utilize their own buildings or assets, not just socially performance driven, but also utilizing the material assets as well. So I think generally the social aspect is really important because the built environment is around us, it affects us, it influences how we think, how we perceive space, you know, and our well-being as well. So it's definitely really important. And generally, you know, having talked about this earlier outside of this room, we were talking about positive benefits, and we are moving to a space where, you know, particularly BAM want to be perceived to highlight the positive benefits of the work that we do as well. And the circular economy is one of those things where, you know, we can highlight the benefits not just today, but for the next 50, 100 years. And that's economic, social, environment as well.
Okay, and yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and trying to contrast financial benefits with other types of value, and yeah, we had some interesting discussions, which I think would be useful to sort of recapitulate here. Alex, this is your thing. I mean, you're looking at different types of value, and how that can be brought into thinking about the future. So maybe you'd like to kick off.
Yeah. Once again, when you look at this restorative economy and regenerative economy that we need to create, we need to think in system. And by thinking in system, your circular model could be highly successful. But we also know that if we only measure success with financial return, we know that in 2008 we know where it led us to. So just measuring success with the financial return might become an issue in a circular economic world. Okay, so obviously there are alternative currencies, cryptocurrencies, alternative money that are appearing. Some of them embed social and environmental values, which are interesting to study. And there are methods today to measure value. Okay, I use one which is the social return on investment, where we recognize value within which the financial return is embedded, but it's the broader value, the social, environmental, and any other value that the people or your customers are recognizing in your product or services. But I truly believe that if you build a circular economy on the current financial system, you might lead to some extreme financial issues that we've experienced in the past. So we might redo the same mistakes. So this is quite critical to me, that we should use a different measurement process to recognize value creation in a circular economy. I give you an example. Last week, Ellen MacArthur was explaining the case of a car manufacturer in Barcelona at the Circular Economy European Summit. And she was saying that manufacturer saved 80% of energy and made 40% profit on the car engine manufacturing. But so what? I mean, are we still thinking about savings in a linear fashion, or are we saying beyond saving energy, we can translate it into labor energy, which is the definition of Walter Stahel in the performance economy. So then you have some benefits to what's in it for me as a citizen. Otherwise, you can sell your circular economic model, and if there is no answer to what's in it for me as a citizen, it might not go into being spread into the different societies in this world. So quite important to keep this in mind.
Right, right. So finance may not be, or just thinking about finance as the sole goal, may not result in a productive circular economy. But then trying to monetize values could be problematic, couldn't it, Ruud?
Yeah, at first I completely agree that when you use the current financial way of thinking, that is not the way forward in a circular economy, because there are indeed other values that are also as important, I would say. Monetizing the other values is something that I'm not particularly fond of, because then you are trying to put everything again in that financial system, which has, when it comes to expressing real values, some flaws, you could say. Also, for instance, when you take, in the case of environmental impact, eco-cost-like things, you have all kinds of different environmental impacts, and by doing it in that way, you try to put them all under a single denominator. So you compare directly global warming potential with toxicity, for instance. But which of the two is more important? How can you weigh them? So I'm in favor of having multiple parameters that express value in different areas.
Okay. So I think one lesson we can learn from that is that we need to think about things differently if we want to do the circular economy. And one point that we've picked up throughout this is this idea of systems. So you said, Nitesh, you mentioned the complexity of what we're trying to do. We have a contributor video. So Nabil Nasser, he's the Earl Brinkman Professor of Engineering at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and he has a quick 3-minute video that we're going to show now on the importance of systems.
So when we talk about the circular economy, we're talking about a system issue. In order to really achieve our goals in a circular model, we really have to think about it from a system view. So from an education perspective, we're looking at a problem that is multidisciplinary in nature, and as a result, we need to make sure that we are providing the education for people to address a problem in a holistic fashion and understand the system implications. So many of the disciplinary approaches that are used in education are not necessarily going to be the most effective one to achieve our goals, and that really calls for a change in the way we educate people in this area, educate people in the field, that would really require us to get into more of multidisciplinary approaches or transdisciplinary approaches that really allow us to ensure that the professionals of the future are able to address the problem in a much more effective fashion than actually addressing it just from disciplinary approaches. It definitely will require, a lot of thinking and a lot of programs that would actually incorporate many of the multidisciplinary ideas or system views in the way we teach many of the concepts relating to circular economy. The university systems are typically built on the disciplinary approaches that we have used successfully for years and years. I believe that the educational system developed from fundamental science, mathematics concepts. The challenges continue to grow in terms of the complexity of our systems, and it resulted in more and more disciplines such as engineering, from electrical to mechanical, looking at specific problem domain. Now I think our challenges are far more complex. We're not only dealing with systems that we engineer, we're dealing with the consequences of that system from the material extraction all the way to the disposal of that product or recycling of that product at the end of use of that product. As a result, our systems got more and more complex, which require really us to rethink many of our approaches that we use in education, and it would call for more and more of the multidisciplinary approaches that actually incorporate a lot more than we have done before. So incorporating the environmental impact related to our design, for example, for people who are studying design, I think will be a fantastic addition, and it would open the door for more collaboration among different disciplines.
And so we're back, and Nabil there was arguing passionately that we need multidisciplinary thinking and we need to think in systems. And this is one of the big rallying cries for the circular economy, but the idea of systems is quite an abstract one. So what we want to do in this session is try to get a concrete handle. So if you're going to do systems thinking, what do you actually need to do? So Nitesh, built environment, operates on lots of different scales, lots of different systems ideas. What does it mean to you?
Well, I think systems thinking for the built environment, again, even within the built environment, could mean different things to different people, but really we're looking at the holistic concept of effects, enablers, the social, environmental, economic impacts on the built environment of different things. So the circular economy. When you look at enablers, prior to this we talked about different contract types, the different business models required, and the different ways you can service the circular economy through products that are tiny, and light bulbs is one of them, where you can have a take-back scheme, reuse product, performance contract, and over different lengths of time as well. Whereas you could be looking at enablers for looking at industrial symbiosis, for example, of how neighborhoods interact with other neighborhoods. So the circular economy could embed certain principles within a district, a business park or an industrial park, but it will have a wider impact on its infrastructure, its influence on the social impacts of neighboring communities. And it's really looking at, maybe the positive benefits of those communities or on economic growth. But it's not just positive, there are negative impacts as well. So it's really trying to sort of look at the wider aspects of, the impacts, the enablers, the opportunities, etc.
Okay, and what type of skills do you think somebody would need? Somebody coming into the built environment today, let's say, that wants to get into the circular economy, they align with the thinking at BAM.
Sure.
What would that ideal person be in terms of the skill set?
I think one of the things that we lack is the commercial impact. So, the business thoughts. We very often sit around the table and we're all environmentalists or sustainability experts or designers, but having the business acumen alongside that, and we've seen through our interactions both with Imperial College in the last couple of years, but also through the Schmidt-MacArthur Fellowship, where we've interacted on sort of short sessions or modules in Imperial College case, but you can see where the graduates, postgraduate students that have no understanding of the built environment really get to grips with the circular economy firstly, but also the likely benefits, the opportunities, the enablers that can actually help you. So bringing those types of skills into the industry is really key.
Okay, great, thank you. And Rud, so you're a professor here at TU Delft, but you've also got a lot of experience in Philips, who do a significant amount of circular economy work, especially around their lighting and their refurbishment for healthcare. So what type of skills, or how do you see systems there, and also what type of skills do the people of today need to embrace this type of model?
Yeah, I don't have a ready-made answer there. I think it's just like we are still learning what circular economy actually is, we are still learning how we can reach its targets. But what for me is quite important when it comes to system thinking is that you are able to take different perspectives. So not just take the perspective of the business. It's an important part, but also take the societal perspective, take the environmental perspective, and not from your business point of view when you're working in a company, but when you're part of the society, what does it mean, what is going on, and how does it fit in a broader context? So it asks at least for an open mind. Further, I think that we still need the ability to explore the ways of working. So we will not be getting rid of all kind of, say, ordinary disciplines. They are still needed. But they should be applied in such a way that you take a broader perspective. And there it will be very helpful when there is cooperation, not only within companies between different disciplines, but also outside companies. How do, for instance, environmentalists look upon certain developments? But when it is about a product that you need to reuse or remanufacture, what needs to be done with the product after its first life cycle? So look further than just, say, the part of value chain that is in your immediate vicinity. And I think a lot of those things can be done from within the current disciplines, but put in a broader context.
Okay.
And taking into account the complexity of the system. So where we often tend to simplify a problem, try to take into account the complexity that is present and deal with that complexity instead of simplifying it.
Okay, and it sounds there as if, you know, so we don't know how the circular economy is going to play out because it is a complex system. It sounds as if, you know, we don't know the answers, so we have to be experimental. I mean, is that something that we have to embrace, a more improvisation or experimental mindset to do this?
Would certainly help, I think, and anyhow there will not be a single answer. For the built environment it will be different than for, say, rapid moving consumer goods or for electronics or for financial products. So there is not a single fits-all answer, and experimenting, having an open mind will be necessary.
That's a shame. It would be so much easier if there were a single answer.
Prefer to do some experimenting.
So Alex, what are your perceptions of systems? How do you actually think of the system and in the context of the circular economy and the work you do?
I mean, system might be a word that businesses could have difficulties to understand. So if I can relate it to their, in the sustainability department of companies, companies are more and more requested to report on their operations, and there is these integrated reporting guidelines that have been issued, and we are asking companies to increase their transparency about the work they do. And within the integrated reporting guidelines, you have your 6 capitals. And the 6 capitals are the financial, the manufactured, social and relationship, so your partnership, the human capital, the intelligent capital, and the last one is your natural capital, obviously. The most important one. So what integrated reporting is saying is that if you maintain the value of all these different capital and stock, you will develop resilience over time, and you will increase your business activities, basically. So education is your core denominator to all these different capitals, and the skills that you need to adapt to each of these, preserving the capital value of each of these ones, will ensure the future success of your company. So that could relate to these 6 capital as a reference that you plug into your system view of what a successful business should be over the long term.
Right.
Okay, beyond the 3 months
Yeah.
return that we measure today.
Yes, no, indeed.
Vision.
And do you think that education is set up to deliver these type of outcomes at the moment? Because that's a lot of things, you know, it's having your 6 capital is a lot of things.
I mean, not as yet. I mean, we talked about it this morning with the unbundling of the education and the pressure that internet has on the university and college system. So it's not there yet, and we should be focusing on a lifelong type of education system, the blurring between the business and the university that would create some kind of very strong partnership into accessing education and the learning on demand when the business need that type of learning and according to the future needs of markets, because obviously most of the jobs are not very well known today. The jobs in 10 years we don't know what they will look like yet. So it's going to be more interactive, more on-demand type of access to education, while the content will still be of high value and very practical for the success of businesses. So yeah, working on that.
Yeah, good. So we've got a short video now. Jad Sirian from IBM Global Center for Excellence for the Circular Economy and John Atchison from Stuff Street are going to talk a little bit about how they think of multidisciplinary thinking and working.
So welcome to the Higher Education Day at the Disruptive Innovation Festival 2016. Today we will talk with IBM and Stuffster about skills and knowledge in the transition to a circular economy. We have Jad and John. John, would you like to start off with introducing yourself?
Sure, yeah, I'm John Atchison. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Stuffster, and we are an early stage company in the United States based out of Seattle, and our focus is on making maximum use out of every item produced. So we look at everything post-sale. We look at, from the moment something gets sold, putting it into a system that can help get the most use as people are using it, but then also begin to monitor resale marketplaces, repair opportunities, donations, charities would like certain items, and just making sure that every item is optimized for use through its entire life cycle, and everything just keeps moving and never kind of gets to a final endpoint.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And Jad, can you please briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. So happy to be here. So Jad Oseiran, I lead at IBM the Global Center of Competence for the Circular Economy, which was recently formed. I work for IBM Global Business Services, which is the consulting arm from IBM. And I mentioned recently formed, but actually within IBM, we've been more than 25 years working on the topic of resource productivity to maximize the residual value for our products. So actually we have a unit called GARS, Global Asset Recovery Services, which works closely with our unit at GBS. So basically the main objective from the Circular Economy Center of Competence is to enable the circular economy from a business model, but also from a technology point of view, because there's a big challenge around the data that needs to be collected around products and the context to optimize the reuse.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you guys for being here today. Jad, do you want to start off with elaborating on what kind of skills and knowledge and thinking do you think is required in a circular economy?
Sure. So actually, it's a topic which I find very important because we are forming now a team which is in our center of competence, and we are just starting with 5 people. And you see already the importance of having different backgrounds from each of the people. So to give you an example, we have a supply chain background person in our team, but also product design, industrial engineering. And then we have your strategy, finance background, which needs to understand all the leasing model, the finance model. Then you come to the operations research, which is really about optimization models, because to optimize reuse, you really need to build that model where you try to maximize certain business targets through reuse. And you have your data scientist needed, which needs to be analyzing various types of data. So already you see a various spectrum of skills. And actually above all this, what is really important is the system understanding and this orchestration about how will all these capabilities fit together. So if I bring that back one step before to education, I think one thing which I think is very important is to start is a couple of things. First of all, in every specialization that we have, was it the science specialization or engineering, I think it's important to bring that connection to the natural ecosystem of reuse. Starting with chemistry, when you start teaching chemistry from the conscious choice of materials, understanding of what choice of materials would have an impact later on your usage health within the buildings, for example, but also on the reuse potential later on. Going to physics with the nano properties of materials. When you talk about 3D printing now, you're basically trying to introduce the physical bonding between atoms, which will bring you some properties which are replacing sometimes the chemistry properties of atoms, the chemical properties of bonding, which are usually one of the reasons the recycling is not really achieving its potential. Going to biology with the biomimicry learning from nature for reuse. So within the specialization, you can already bring that connection to nature and to how reusability can be maximized. But I think what is even more important is our business and economics specialization, which needs to take into account the system view, because we're often really seeing more and more expertise in their fields. Take supply chain, what I studied. I mean, we were often focused on maximizing and optimizing the efficiency of our production. So production was cheap, so let's have few central location and transport everything everywhere. But that's not really taking the system view on the impact of this on other aspects of environment, etc. So I think both the expertise linked to our natural ecosystem needs to be more emphasized, but also the system orchestration capability needs to be emphasized as well from an educational point of view.
Well, I totally agree with Jad. I mean, I think, students coming into the realm of circular economy really have to have the ability to think systemically. They have to be able to see kind of cross-disciplinary approaches to things. And although you need to have kind of a center skill set, whether it's engineering or marketing or whatever, you really have to be able to think beyond your skill set and think of how these different pieces fit together to actually create this collective whole. And the only thing I'd really add to it is just the importance of kind of the interpersonal skills that need to go along with that, in the sense that you need people that really can collaborate and can really bring people onto a team and work well with people on a team, because both internally and externally, it's really critical to circular economy. You've got to be able to work across departments, you've got to be able to work across disciplines, and you've got to be able to work with outside groups that may be very, very different in the way they think about things than you are, and be able to not only kind of work with them, but in some ways, at this point, and I don't know if Chad, if you'd agree with this, but I feel like, we're kind of, there's a little bit of kind of evangelists in us, that we're kind of out there trying to get people to buy into the circular economy and the potential of circular economy. And so having a little bit of salesmanship is also helpful.
And how would you see higher education being developed over the next few years? Where are fields or areas where you would like to see students and graduates being a bit more stronger in their skills? And how do you see universities getting there in their education? John, would you like to start off?
Well, I'll take a shot at it. I mean, I'm, admittedly not an expert at universities and how they operate and how they, go about teaching the students, other than my own experience as a student. But, there are certainly ways that you can begin to foster collaboration and systemic thinking by bringing together teams in the educational process. And to the extent that universities can kind of structure a curriculum so that people are not just going deep down into their own particular, functional area and learning that skill, but also working on kind of bigger projects that require collaboration, that require, kind of cross-pollination of ideas and skills. And I know that when I was in graduate school, the university did a pretty good job of kind of forcing us into teams based on the topics that were being addressed and the things that they wanted us to work on. And I think it was an incredibly helpful experience for me. And it's the kind of thing that I think is really imperative for making successful new employees in the world of circular economy.
I definitely agree. I mean, maybe I can add the perspective of where we're seeing through our work, but also through my interaction with students, because I was involved a few times with some interaction with students who are actually or joining some training program at IBM or very interested in the topic, just new joiners. I think one of the fields in the higher education, which is very important, to start with, is to just realize, to infuse, if you want, more of the biology learning into different disciplines that we teach, because there's so much to learn from nature and what is known as biomimicry already in the fields of design, in the fields of in all different fields of applied sciences. And I think what is important in all kind of science disciplines that we have is to again link it to your natural ecosystem. So how does that fit in a finite resource system that we're living in? Starting with your chemistry choice, with your material selection, what you learn in chemistry. Why do we need to have just a dry teaching of chemistry with a very long formulas on the board, with just focused on the usage of that product without putting it in context? Where is it ending? And I think when you start teaching chemistry from the start with your design, being the design based on for material selection, but also design for when you talk for other products, for re-engineering, for modularity, for upgradability. These are all aspects which you, more and more, there are more use cases which shows that they have business value. I mean, when we design for upgradability at IBM, the starting point is not the environment. The starting point, it just makes much more business sense, and you will have a much more stronger value proposition. And at the same time, of course, at the end, you will be able to disconnect the parts and have an easier potential of reuse.
Welcome back. So Jad and John, they're talking about specific ways we could think about multidisciplinary thinking. One of the difficulties there is we're creating new knowledge. We're bringing together disciplines that don't naturally play well together, at least in the current idea of the university. And so we have to think about different ways of creating value. So Nitesh, you look at value creation in specific ways in the built environment. Maybe you want to tell us what you're doing.
We do, and for years, we'll procure a building because there's a predefined route. We know the outcome of the building. We know what it's going to look like, the environmental conditions, etc. And now we're getting to a place where we realise that clients are expecting more. They're demanding more of their contractors, and no longer are we sort of producing a building or an asset and then, walking off to the next job. But actually there's an expectation that, quite rightly, that we should be there for the longer term, that we should be helping to minimize the performance gap on our buildings or our building stock or assets. We should be ensuring better residual values. And that's one of the key factors that's come out of our sort of circular economy investigations, where we've had a handful of clients that want the circular economy, or they're amenable to sort of try things out, and they've all got different requirements. So you've got to tailor the value proposition to each and every client. And so we talked about earlier the different types of business models, but really it's about getting better value for our clients, better asset value, better residual value, and long-term growth. So that whether you're talking about taking materials back after the end of a first use and reassembling it elsewhere, or performance contracts, essentially what you're doing is you're offering the client a better reassurance that their buildings or assets will be fit for purpose for longer.
Okay, so I was in Amsterdam over the weekend, and you look up on the beautiful houses, and it's like 1642 300 to 400 years old. What does that sort of value creation, how do you think about that in the built environment? Because you do last forever, or you should do.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The problem we have is that over 80%, maybe even more, of our assets are existing. So we need to think about not just our new build and how we can embed data, use BIM, deal with our supply chain, and building information management. So looking at how we can use technology to embed data to deal with our supply chain and transparency issues. But we have a huge amount of building stock that's there already. So we're going in and retrospectively carrying out cloud point surveys, putting in data retrospectively into our models, so information models, 3D models, to enable us to have a better understanding of how that asset performs. This is all value, value creation.
Yeah.
And I think we're just dealing with it now. We're sort of learning how to cope with our sort of client demands, upfront, rather than being reactive. We're trying to be more proactive by using that information.
So when we talk about circular economy, we're talking about longevity, we're talking about reuse. Do you see value creation for the circular economy being significantly different from that in the linear economy route?
Yeah, I think it will be quite different in a number of respects because of the completely different way in which you look at the product and in the way in which you take the entire system in which the product is used into account. So what I think is quite important is that by doing these things, by looking into these things, you take life cycle thinking into account. And that's not just a single life cycle, but also what happens beyond that first life cycle. So it's really about developing a long-term vision. When you start with developing a product, raising a building, whatever. What I also think is quite important is that when you look at those systems and those long-term vision, that you need to make sure that the systems have built-in feedback loops. You need information feeding back into the system to see how the developments work out and what you need to improve to make the next steps, because we won't have it perfect the first time. Feedback will also be important on a smaller scale when it comes, for instance, to reuse or remanufacturing or parts harvesting. How to determine what is the best step, how to determine when to go to recycling and when a product can still be reused. So feedback at different levels in the system will be quite important.
Okay, so we're talking about long-term visions. We're talking about using data, and I think Alex, the video, Jad and John, they also had quite a technocratic vision of the circular economy. Is there a danger in that, do you think?
Well, again, it's about defining your product in a system thinking approach, and when you are IBM, you need to gather a lot of skills that you have already in-house, but it's difficult to move a company that was in existence for so many years.
So welcome to the Higher Education Day at the Disruptive
Circular framework. When you are Stuffster, you are a startup, you can just jump into that new economic model much more easily and pick and choose the skills that you need as you grow. So obviously not in the same game room and different challenges here, but just to build on the point of Roots and Nitesh is that yes, we need to have a lifelong vision. We need to look at the life cycle and understand it. And if we take the need for BAM to measure value and to create value to their customers, it could be that on top of designing the best building with the latest technology and the latest circular thinking, is that at the end of the day there is a customer at the end. there is a human being at the end that might not be as resilient as you expect, so there might be some life incidents. Maybe you are single, so you need just a house with a 2 rooms. Maybe you get married, you need an extra room. Modular thinking, you get your kids, you add some bedrooms. But maybe there is some incident in the customer's life, like getting divorced, so you need to reduce the size of the house. So is it better to see the customer walking off, BAM, and move on with somebody else, a competitor, or keep that customer helping when he needs help through his divorce or through his life incident, reduce the impact of the financial impact and accompany him like a partner, and then grow again with that person or the woman over a long life strategy. So this angle of the circular economy is also to be kept into mind, because you need to nurture the customers that you have, not to see them go.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm getting the signal that we have to wrap up now, unfortunately. So what I'm going to do is just go around the table and ask if you could summarize the key skills that anybody getting into the circular economy today needs in less than 15 seconds. That would be fabulous. So, Ruud, please.
Life cycle thinking and taking into account system complexity.
Lovely. Nitesh.
We talked about business innovation or business sort of acumen, but also to empower different skill sets to work together to encourage collaboration.
Okay, Alex.
Truth, empathy, versatility, and collaboration.
Okay, so a whole range of different skills you need to bring together and to think differently. From my perspective, we need technical, we need business, but we also need the social sciences and the humanities as well. So please don't forget about those if you're out there doing the circular economy. Thank you for tuning in. We will be up next with the IDEO session.